It's a little pushing the envelope a little bit too much, I think.
No. Hi, this is
Hi.
WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio, TV, and podcast #1 Internet Singles Talk Network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine. How are you?
I'm good, except you had the
Yeah.
roof in your. No, I have. They're tearing all the cement up around the pool in the community where I live. And there's a little backhoe taking the big chunks of cement up and down the side of my house. So there's really no quiet place in my house now because they're fixing the roof over my office. So
Hmm.
there's hammering and drilling. So at least the beep beep's less steady. So
True.
so sorry.
That's
This
okay. We'll,
is
we'll get
what's
used to it
live,
and then ignore
right?
it. We'll ignore it
It's
and just keep moving on. Yeah, we're fine.
it's the excitement about live. So yes,
Isn't it?
we're going to be talking about too much or too little in dating, but oh my God, this is way too much noise in my little house. So I think this is going to be fun because there's so many different layers to what's too much and not enough in dating. And boy, I
Oh,
think that's
yes.
in the eye of the beholder and the eye of the giver
Mm.
and what's happened before and what your expectations are because of that. Oh my gosh, I'm just
Oh,
very excited about this. We could talk for like 3 hours about this one.
God. I got a few things to bring into conversation. It'll be fun.
I was thinking that you would, and I certainly do too.
Yeah.
So I think the place that most people need to start that I talk to is what are your expectations? What are your expectations for the first meeting? What are your expectations for the second meeting? Because if you're not clear about your expectations, you're probably not going to get them and maybe be disappointed. And then it's never enough or never or always too much. And that's never a good way to feel.
Well, that and the thing about that right away is it is relative because the thing is, you may think it's too much, but for them it's normal, or
Hmm.
there's too little and think it's normal, or vice versa. So
Yes.
the only I mean, to sort of cut to the chase, I guess one of the solutions would be to have a conversation about this sort of thing and say, how do you receive this? How do you take it? How is this coming over to you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there's so much before we get to that point.
Yeah. So when
So
you
think about
figure out what it is that's important to you, then you work out how to say it in not a too much way to the other person too, because that could be a
exactly
too much conversation for sure.
right. But so we don't finish the show quickly. Let's get into the piece in between that,
Yes.
which is all the things that we do that are too much and too little in relationships. Some of the reasons why as well, because there's a few things I can bring on the table about that as well.
Yes. So what's too much? What's too much? Too much is needy. I think most people would use the word needy as something that would be in brackets that would feel too much. You
Yeah,
feel too needy, the other person feels too needy, whatever they're doing or saying would fit in the dictionary under needy.
another term would be smothering.
Smothering is very good. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. So there's definitely that's the extreme on the too much side.
Mhm. And I think it's important to have a scale because how would we know what's too much or
Oh
too
yeah,
little if we don't have a scale?
right.
So then
On the other end,
too, too little, not enough is aloof, distant, feeling disconnected, unconnected, because that would be way too little. That would be way not enough if the person's feeling and then you get in the middle where they're like doing the push pull thing. So we'll do that middle
we'll get
part too.
get that later on. Another way, funny, a positive spin on that could be saying that they're unattached. But
Yes.
truthfully, for a lot of people, it is they just can't be bothered to just get invested.
Hmm.
And so there's definitely the spectrum we're going to talk about, definitely the range that comes into that point. But some people definitely there is an extreme, almost aversion to getting close.
Hmm.
So they'd rather just sort of go on a date and be almost at arm's length and not connect, sort of thing, because that feels more comfortable to them.
Yes.
I want to quickly overlay a couple of things, one quick thing as well, because when we start talking about this, the too much too little stuff, what came up for me is the attachment styles.
Uh-huh.
If you haven't read the book, the Attach on Amazon, you can go get the book. It's a long book, and frankly, the simple truth is there are three main types of attachment style. One is anxious, one is avoidant and one is secure. But in this context, it's the avoidant and the anxious that are kind of the key ones to talk about here, is because what's too much oftentimes is an anxious-driven attachment, meaning that they want to stay connected to know they are loved, sort of thing. It's
Yes.
that thing about when you
at all
sorry.
costs. At
Yeah,
all costs.
Yeah, absolutely. Then the avoidant is one where they don't want to get invested. They want to have their own life and their own freedoms at the expense of dating. So it's almost like, I mean, truth be told, most avoidant people don't really want to date anyway because there's too much effort.
Mm-hmm.
But if they do date, they're going to do it from a very sort of standoffish place, as you were saying. So in a way, for me, those two attachment styles lay on top of this very well with the two extremes of the spectrum. And we'll definitely get to the secure one later on, which is the one in the middle, which is the most balanced of the three.
Yes. Yeah. So I think it's been my personal experience and my experience with clients that where you fall on the dating scale often starts from how'd you feel in your family?
Oh,
Did
yeah.
you get too much? Did you get too little? I mean, nowadays the term with helicopter parents, I think about that a lot, where the kids are never left alone. They don't do anything independent. Their time is micromanaged. Their parents are hovering around all the time. And what are they going to do in relationship, in just friendships and certainly love and romantic,
Mm-hmm.
that it can be so established when you're little.
Oh,
that
yeah.
could just feel either direction it could go. But certainly that's you're accustomed to lots of attention. So would you want more of that or would you rebel? But neither way is going to build you, as you mentioned, a healthy, happy, romantic relationship coming from either of those directions.
Very true. I mean, for me, I do know that my dating life wasn't necessarily a reflection on my parents in this context. I definitely was probably more anxiously driven because I would always want to be immersed in relationships, almost because it was having ice cream and then wanting so much you get sick of it, sort of thing. Is that the drive to have fully immersed and fully embraced, because I was, being single to being in a relationship where you had all the sex and physical contact and the intimacy and all those different things. It's like feasting in a way. So there's that drive to consume, which can be extremely overwhelming for the other person. So not particularly healthy. And so I know from my experience, I did that to a couple of partners.
Yeah, me too. And how much of your emotional well-being is attached to just being with another person, not necessarily somebody that you have a great relationship with and you're building something, but just somebody's better than nothing, even if it's not good, where that can be so overwhelming for the other person. And if you get two people like that, nothing gets built on solid ground. Everything's always tenuous, because if you're so tied up in the only way I'm going to feel like a whole person is when I'm with another person, you're always worried they're going to leave. They'll meet somebody else. They'll get hit by a bus. They'll get mad at you. And if they're anxious about it too, they're never going to relax and worried about that you're going to leave. And nobody's being their authentic self. So I know we're talking about such extremes, but it's only because we have experienced them in our lives and we've experienced it with clients, that sometimes you don't recognize it if we only talk about the subtle things. So I'm glad that we're talking about the really extremes first, because most people go, oh yeah, maybe I have a little bit of that, but maybe not that much. But at least I know now I could work on it because it's not so extreme. Because often you can tell when you meet somebody that has one of those extremes of, I can't get attached to anybody, or I want to be attached at the hip with everybody.
Right. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. That's the thing. It is. I mean, I'll say this. I definitely want to agree with you and say that there are many people out there who, frankly, are thinking they're perfect. So what we're talking about has nothing to do with them at all.
Yeah.
So this topic is for you when you want to listen to it in the privacy of your own home, so that you don't admit to anybody except yourself whether you actually align one end of the spectrum or the other of this conversation. The key, though, is that this is a spectrum and has an array. And if you find yourself generally speaking, you'll be towards one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum. Not at the ends, but on that spectrum, there is a range. And hopefully you'll get some things from that talk that'll give you some guidance as to how to be more in the middle of that, where you can be in a more secure state, so to speak. Because the thing is, I know for myself, I have had both ends of the spectrum. Like I said earlier, I definitely had the fully immersed, hands-on, joined at the hip energy with a relationship that burnt out my relationship pretty quickly, which was the too much. And also had the very aloof side where I just was not interested in a relationship, and I would basically got dragged into one, to be blunt. And I was not interested in being in a relationship initially, because then as soon as we're in it, I basically became too much, you know. So that was definitely a spectrum I played on. And the thing is that, I'll say it this way, I was telling somebody about this earlier today about this, that none of us are perfect. We've all got stuff to work on, we'll all get issues. So what we're talking about here is not some abhorrent thing that only a few people deal with. We all deal with different parts of it. Mm-hmm. And yes, as you said, Christine, quite a lot of it can be tied to our younger age and childhood and family dynamics that can play out in our adult relationships. And some of that played out in mine too. The example I gave, it didn't. So recognizing that we all have had parental influence, doesn't matter how long we had our parents around or how much we were around our parents. If we had one parent, both parents, remarried parents, grandparents, whoever raised us, we get imprinted in ways that do influence our adult dating life without us being aware that it's doing that. Mm-hmm. So definitely stay tuned to the rest of the show, because we'll break this down more easily and you'll actually find value and even possible tips and cures to change the way you date and relate yourself.
Great comment, Barry, as always.
Thank you.
And certainly the thing to look at is, how did you deal with your early friendships? Did you cling to them? Did it break your heart if they wanted to be friends with somebody else at the same time even? I mean, some people just don't even want to share their friendship. Or the friendship ran its course and they went with somebody else. How did that affect you? And do you still feel the same way about friends and romantic relationships now? Because it's never to give yourself a hard time, ever, ever, ever. It's all like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I was doing that. Well, now that I realize I was doing that, I could choose to do something different. I can learn how to do this differently. So what I've done for me is looked back at, how did I handle friendships when I was growing up? How did I handle business relationships, colleagues, people from other companies, when I went to like networking groups? And it was so interesting going with my own company, because I don't know, there'd be like a couple hundred people and I'd come home with 10 business cards and I go, well, that's not very many. And they go, that's a good percentage that you found people that 10 people actually were interested in your service. That's a lot. But my way of thinking from the way I grew up was, it had to be at least the majority, if not everybody, or I was failing. Mm-hmm. So it was so interesting to adjust it, even just in my business life, which was much easier than my personal life for sure in the beginning. But then to go, oh yeah, I'm not going to like everybody, because I used to think that I had to make people like me, even if I didn't like them. I had that malady a lot growing up, a lot. So when I figured out that I didn't have to like everybody, and it said nothing bad about me if they didn't like me, because there were plenty of people that did like me. That was a big hurdle. That was a really big hurdle to get over. And I think anything that you become, you've adjusted your thinking and now act a different way, is always a little bit of an Achilles heel. So I find that sometimes I'm like, oh, they didn't like me. Well, that was kind of sad. And even as a grown-up adult person, I still feel that every once in a while and have to go, oh yeah, it's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. But I find myself still thinking that sometimes.
It's funny because I'm the other side of the spectrum on that one. Growing up was funny. Looking back now, it's funny. It wasn't at the time. But growing up being bullied in high school, I really felt myself being on the outside and not trusting anybody. So I was always avoidant of getting too invested, too connected, because I was afraid of getting hurt again or getting, rejected. Yeah. And so it's interesting now, because my friendships and relationships I have with people are just so important in my life, and they're really rock solid.
Yeah.
But boy, back then, trusting somebody was a long process for me. and a slow one, because I needed to rebuild up to know that this person wasn't going to double cross me and backstab me or abuse me or hurt me, whatever it was, because that was the feeling I had growing up, in my peer group. And so that shift and understanding, it was kind of like when I met someone, it's like, I mean, and I'm using the movie quotes, like, they like me, they really like me, that sort of thing. It's that feeling of just, they actually like me for me, not to get something out of me or to use me for something, because that was the belief I was carrying. So it is a wonderful shift, and it's interesting. It's like you're at one end, I'm the other end of the spectrum, realizing how we perceive things, but how we can shift those pieces. So for anybody listening, I think they'll find that they're on one end or both of the ends of the spectrum, and know that we can relate definitely to what they're going through.
Yeah. And something recently I've been saying that there's so many people that say they wear their heart on their sleeve. And I said, I think God was thinking when he put your heart behind your rib cage, that it's protected and that people need to be worthy. You need to jump through a couple hoops to see if you can have access to my heart. I can certainly like you. I can have conversations with you, but you don't have access to my heart here. My heart is going to be inside of here. And I think either way, we're too vulnerable. Not enough. Too much and not enough makes us very vulnerable for not really good intentioned people either. I think that's a really good reason to learn how to adjust the way that you're approaching relationships, business, personal, friendships, because being that much on guard either way doesn't give you access to people that are in the middle.
It's true. I mean, and that fear of rejection for me, and it's interesting looking in hindsight now, is I know better, and sometimes I feel better. There's definitely this thing where I don't always admit this is the way it is knowing that with rejection, what it really is saying is you didn't get what you didn't have in the first place. Which is what rejection really is. Rejection is not you were cast out and lost what you had. No, you didn't have it in the first place. So you asked for something, you didn't get it, you're back where you started. But boy, I had so much investment in that, and I'm sure a lot of people do, that there was it wasn't an assumption, but it was like there was a gift or a prize on the other side of that yes that I didn't get when they said no. And so that rejection became so wounding back then. I mean, now every so often it does happen again, but most of the time I get someone says no, it's like, oh, okay, that's just the way it is. And so that's the healthy way, ideally. But getting there sometimes is work, because sometimes I'm still attached to, I want that result and not getting it.
There's the expectation.
Yes.
And not even knowing, we don't have enough evidence to know that we can have that expectation.
Yeah.
So wondering, seeing if it's available, but expecting it to happen before you have vetted the person. I mean, I would get my heart slammed over and over and over and over and over to people who didn't even notice, didn't even care. I mean, that's the really sad thing. I mean, some people they were important people to me, and I got my feelings hurt, but I would get my feelings hurt. And when I look back and think, they certainly didn't care about me, and they didn't even notice how upset I was. So to learn to have better boundaries and better self-confidence to say, let's see, do they fit me? I mean, I'm thinking, do I fit them? But I now made it more important. Did they fit me? Do they fit in the criteria of me? Which is why at the top of my list, I always say is they have to be nice people, because I'm a nice person. I need them to be nice to me, and I need them to be nice to the world when they're out there. I want them to have strong boundaries and stick up for themselves, but initially in the nicest way possible. That is really essential to me. And I didn't vet people for that. And I let people in my life, they were nice people. It's just not who they were. And I'd be so upset and hurt and mad and go, well, why don't you act nicely? It just wasn't who they were.
Right. And that's the thing, is that we do have a habit of painting other people with a vision of what we think they should be like. And when they're not, we get upset with them. It's like, they were never that in the first place. But we get so caught up in the way that things should be. Therefore, they should be this way. And when they're not, it's like something's wrong with the universe. Like somehow the universe affronted us by telling us it wasn't so. And it's like, no, it never was that way. We just made an assumption.
And the other thing that happens in personal relationships that happened to me in friendships and romantic is, well, I'm a nice person and I treat them nicely. So of course they're going to treat me nicely back. And that isn't a given either. I mean, that expectation is really a misnomer. The people who think that set themselves up for such a problem, because I did it for years. So I do say, all right, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's see what happens. I'm happy to have you react nicely, but if you don't, I'm exiting stage left. And so I don't get invested in, well, of course they're going to be nice because I'm nice. It doesn't work that way in the world. And it was a really kind of a rude awakening, but it really has been helpful to learn that.
Oh yeah, I mean that is a wise choice, frankly, and a self-preservation methodology, to be honest, as well, because there is definitely the temptation to feel that we were wrong somehow, that we did something wrong or they wronged us, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And again, rejection is one of the things. You just didn't get what you didn't have in the first place. So why are you getting all upset and creating all these rules and judgments about yourself that don't have any place to land? You just make things up. So don't do that.
And then I didn't feel obligated to stay around and try to change them.
Right.
I would go, oh, that's who they are. I mean, I love that saying, that Maya Angelou saying, when people show you who they are, please believe them. It has become a mantra for me, because I go, oh, well, gosh, that's how they treat other people and that's how they act. And okay, I accept that. But I'm not going to be in their life and they're not going to be in mine. That was really freeing too, because I stopped being upset with how they were. I went, oh, it is who they are. Okay. It was so freeing to not be upset.
Yeah. Huge.
It's so huge. So when you're vetting people, when you're dating, what is too much or too little for you? I mean, it's across the gamut. I mean, I'll just, I've talked about that. When I'm involved with someone, I like a good morning text. I like, I'm thinking about you in the middle of the day, and I like a good night text. I really do. And a phone call too. And I married somebody that he was the champion at that, because it was who he was too. So I got as much attention as I could have ever imagined wanting. And I learned that right away earlier in our dating. And I have actually dated, even for a while, men that said, I could do the morning, the good night, but I can't guarantee the day. I just can't. This is how my life is. This is what's going on. Are you okay with that? And I go, yeah. And every once in a while, I'd get something and I'd get all excited about it, but I never got mad that they didn't. I always celebrated that they did, because I accepted they told me. See, the hard thing is when you don't go, well, but I know they really will change. They really will get around to it. They never did. They never did. And it was important to go, is this good enough? See, there's the enough in the middle, the good enough that's in the middle, that I was like, I like the time I spend with them. And we would talk for hours when we were together. So I got lots of time. So was that worth not getting in the middle of the day? Yeah. But it was my personal decision, nobody else's.
Yeah, that's the key.
Yeah.
So we got to take a break, but I want to talk definitely more about some other things, including how the 5 love languages can impact your dating in this arena that we're talking about here. So we'll come back for more in a moment.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Yes, indeed.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business show showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact GoingSoloDirectory.com.
And we're back talking about what's too little and what's too much, what's not enough and what's too much in a relationship. Oh. That's why I tease that everybody's got a manual inside of them and they need to look at who am I when I'm single and what's the chapter when I first meet somebody and what's the chapter when we start making a commitment and what's the chapter if we live together and what's the chapter if we get engaged and what's it if we get married, because they're different for most people. Could be subtle differences, could be huge differences.
Oh yeah. That's such a it's such a recognizable point we need to make. You said it's a release that we do these different chapters that we find us in depending on where we are in a relationship. So it's so vital to recognize that we're a different person at this point in time we were at that point in time, and then respond differently accordingly. Yeah, that's a big one. Speaking of books,
yes,
I teased before the break about the 5 love languages, and I mentioned that book in my book because I have a book out as well. Yeah. But in the 5 love languages, I recognize this topic can be relevant because many people's connection to each other is done through a filter of a love language. And just for reference, for people who don't remember the 5 languages off the top of their head, there's physical touch, there's quality time, acts of service, gifts, and words of affirmation.
Words of affirmation, because that's me.
Yes. And mine's quality time and physical touch. And my top 2, they're by the top ones.
And mine's words of affirmation and physical touch. So there you go.
Exactly. So for me, in this context of what's too much, what's not enough, if you're with somebody who has a different love language, you may discover the fact that this person doesn't bring enough to dating because they don't speak your love language, or vice versa. So first of all, knowing your love language, it sounds so simplistic, but you go online and do the 5 love languages test. But just simply to know, okay, my primary languages are physical touch and quality time. So if the person I'm dating doesn't, just showers me with gifts, I won't care as much. Or if they just want to tell me how much they care about me, it's like, unless, for you that will work, obviously, but for me, it doesn't work necessarily because I don't get to spend the quality time with them or have touch with them. It's like when someone touches my arm, it's like, oh, okay, I'm interested, that sort of thing. It's that feeling. And so in this perception of what's too much, what's too little, the too little part can be from the fact, or not enough, is the fact that you don't speak the same love language. So if you're dating somebody and you've got past the first hurdles, and you start to make connection and building a relationship, take the test together. Learn what each other's preference is so you know what to practice for the other person's benefit. This is the key. It may not be your love language, but if it's theirs and you want to show them that you love them, that it isn't not enough, but you can love them enough, is learn what the love language is so you can then provide it for them so they can feel love the way they know they'll feel love most accurately. So recommend it highly to do that. I know that you're running ahead because you know that one's true for you too.
And it's such a really, the test takes like 10 minutes. Yeah. And you can certainly spend a little longer talking about it. But just to first know, how do you feel cared about? What is the way that's the most important to you? So I'm words of appreciation person. I want you to think about me in the morning. I want you to tell me you're thinking about me at night. I want you to stop in the middle of the day and go, she's so important to me, I'm going to send her a text. And I've even had guys tell me they set it on an alarm, which I thought that made me feel even more important that they set an alarm to send me a text. Some were like, they should just think about it. I don't care. I just want them to do it.
But that's the thing, is you warrant an alarm. That's great.
I was fine with an alarm because that made me feel doubly important, that it was so important he set an alarm and he would do it. So because words of affirmation was not important to him, he had to go, oh, that really would make you happy? Okay. But his was quality time, which was so interesting because his quality of time was doing stuff with him. Come watch me work. That was watch me work on my car. Talk to me while I work on my car. Come watch. I learned how to clean guns. He cleaned guns. Was this really, that was how and that's the other thing when you go, well, what is the quality time thing that you like? Because not everybody's the same. I want you to sit and have a long conversation with me. That's a really good quality time for me. He wanted me to, and I learned, and I would like, can I help? But that was fine, but he was perfectly happy if I would just, my company there And he got to tell me about it and teach me about it, but he wanted my presence in his sphere. And I was
Yeah.
like, that's so interesting. So I love learning not only what your language is, but how do you want it expressed to you? Because that's the other piece. Because I've talked about my niece and her husband, that his is top is physical touch and hers is barely 5. And they have a wonderful physical relationship, but she's had kids and touching, and it's a lot. And by the end of the day, she's like, ugh, but he really needs it. So they bought a chair and a half. It's smaller than a love seat, but bigger than a chair. And they sit together with their laptops or their phones, and they put their feet together. And she reaches over and plays with his hair occasionally. And you just watch him. When we're at their house, he just melts when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
But they had to buy a chair, and she had to think of, and she loved sitting there with him, but she wouldn't think about touching him this much if he hadn't need this, have to have this, especially at the end of my hard day. And I've had to be all businessy, and I just need this soft, wonderful wifey person. And he loves it when his kids come curl up in his lap. So it wasn't just physical touch. It's what kind do you want? What makes you feel cared about? And that the person, I think it's even like cooler when the person was kind of opposite, and they do have to make kind of a little effort about, well, I wouldn't even have thought of that because it was my number 5.
Right. And that's actually fun. And I love the idea of the spectrum that you're defining within each one too. That's the thing, because even words of affirmation sounds so simple. It's like just say nice things about them. It's like, yeah, but how you say it's more important. If you whisper in their ear versus yell it in their face, or however you do that. So it's important to have those communications. And like with the text, the alarm, it's like whatever it is that lines up best to create the result that is most satisfying. Because the whole point about the love language is to improve your giving and receiving of love with your partner, so you both feel loved by it. And that's where you get to the place of balance in this dating conversation. Because again, what's too much, what's not enough. When you find the ways to connect and communicate the language of love that the other person is wanting and you want as well to receive back, you find that place for what I call the secure attachment, or sorry, what I'm terming in this context from the book Attached. Secure attachment is that sense of you put investment into the relationship so that you know that what you provide for the other person is what they want to receive, and vice versa.
That's and in the amount and in the manner.
Exactly.
Because the other thing that used to make me excited, my husband would come home and tell me what he told other people about me nice. Not just what you said, but you told me that you told other people. He was my best PR person. He was always telling people about what I was doing. It would just light me up. I was just beside myself. He loved it that I did his laundry. He thought doing his laundry was like the coolest thing ever, because he'd been married twice before and they were not laundry people. And I actually liked doing laundry, but it made it even more fun because he'd go, wow, it's like magic. And my laundry's never smelled like this before. So that way you want to go, oh, I want to do it more, even if it's not your thing, because the other person gets so and if it's a person you care about, how fun is it to make them happy? And the thing that happens is the more happy you make the other person, the more they go, what can I do for you? It's amazing how it works.
Yeah, and that's awesome. But one thing I'll say, as by the way, is that our love languages don't stay static forever. So definitely recommend, if you're in a couple in a relationship, do it every year or so, every couple of years, because you might discover your percentages of the different love languages might move up and down the spectrum slightly. So you'll find yourself now moving to a different area where acts of service is the more priority than words of affirmation, for example. So definitely revisit the test every so often, because it's good reminder. So that's one little gift to give you that you may not have been aware of, that can help you have a more connected way of being in a relationship.
So when you talk about with yourself or a coach or your friends, what's happened in your past relationships? Look at the things that were too much. What did they do too much? What did people tell you were too much? And what were the things that were not enough, that you didn't get enough of, that people said you didn't get enough of? And I tell people it's like going on an archaeological dig. You're just digging back to get the artifacts, the fossils, to go, oh, well, now I have more information that I can now make some determination of how to do this differently. Because the whole point of too much or not enough is it's unsatisfying. Wouldn't you like to be more satisfied? You want to feel satisfied. You'd like the other person to feel satisfied. So first you have to find out where the imbalance is, where the uneven is that you and I looked at that turned out to be so different. We've never talked about it before. So that's in this context. So that was interesting about how do I get feeling like I'm getting enough, but in a satisfying way?
Mm-hmm.
And how would you get enough in a satisfying way that
Right.
didn't feel like too much distance or too much close that wasn't healthy for me? So I think it's always so important to look back and go, oh, what did I learn? Never to give yourself a hard time, because the people who should give themselves a hard time are the ones that say, I don't want to learn and I know everything. And why would I even need to learn about dating or relationships? It's always the other person. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm loving this because it is a chance to explore the ways of discussing and discovering what is too much, what's not enough, but also how to navigate out of it into a more centered place on the spectrum, so to speak. Because again, we're talking about the spectrum this array comes on up to. But I want to reflect back one thing you said earlier about talking about how we were raised in our family dynamics. Because most people, to be honest, don't even think about this stuff when they're dating, of course.
No.
So the patterns you notice that are happening without you even thinking about it, those default automatic autopilot type things that we do, where we may smother the person or maybe so aloof we don't remember to call them for 6 days, whatever those things are for us. If we don't want to keep maintaining those things so they're not working for us, which is often the case, some self-investigation you can do on your own, but certainly with a coach or with an expert, somebody knows what they're doing to help you with this, is to look back and learn and look at what you learned as a kid and didn't necessarily know that you were learning. Because this big thing is about how it becomes unconscious, not even something that's really present in our mind. So we may have learned it without thinking we learned it, not even realizing we learned it. But notice that what you're doing now tells you to how something happened with your mother or your father when you're 5 years old, or with your sibling, or something else that you learned when you're growing up that becomes an influence in your adult life, running as an autopilot without you even being aware of it, because that's the way it works.
Mm-hmm.
Because the good news is when you start shining a light on those things and seeing what is there and it's not working for you, you can see the way to change it. Because it's no longer autopilot, it becomes conscious. You can say, I see that doesn't work. I want to change that.
Yeah.
And you can get some improvements.
So true. And the thing that I tell people, the way to forgive yourself is we had no filtering as children.
Right.
We just absorbed what was going on. Generally, we didn't talk back because we were dependent on them for food and clothes and shelter. I mean, really, they were in charge. And then to even think, is this really making me feel good? Does this make me feel bad? And why? It doesn't happen generally when you're a child. So the good news now is a grown up, I say grown-ass adult, you get a chance to say, does this working for me? I see where I got it from. And, we do the parents did the best they could. Okay. And now you get to decide, I'd like to live differently. I'd like to behave differently. I'd like to have a different relationship with myself and with the other person. And how do you do that if you don't, as you said, shine a light on it and say, oh, that is what I learned. Huh. Yeah, that isn't working well for me. I wonder what other options there are. Because that's the other thing too. At least you finally have said, I don't think I like this option, but that's where you really can get benefit from talking to one of us, that you say, well, look at all the other options there are. Let's see what fits you. What baby steps can you make that'll now send you in a direction that feels more whole to you, more satisfying, more contentment with just yourself. Because we give ourselves a really hard time when our relationships aren't working out, even if we do want to blame it on the other person. So if we could have a more satisfying I love your face, a satisfying relation with ourselves, we can have a much better relationship with other people. I've just heard that so much lately, and it's the truth that the more you care about yourself, the more you love yourself, the more kind you are to yourself, the more that you'll attract somebody that'll act the same way towards you. Because if we're beating ourselves up, it's amazing how we'll attract people that'll be happy to help beat us up. That's what I did with my first marriage. Boy, he's fit right in that little slot.
Oh yeah, I was cracking up just the way you're saying it so beautifully, so eloquently and beautifully put. And we definitely are. I was going to say prototypes. That's not the right word, but definitely are living the life that we were raised with without realizing it. And that autopilot piece we do is so amazing, so bizarre and amazing. And definitely don't judge what happened, because we did the best we know how. We were definitely, I mean, I'm reiterating what you said, but the thing is that we are amazing students of life, but oftentimes we're not aware we're learning. And so we're just running out things in life that we didn't know we'd learned, and they become stumbling blocks or challenges in relationship, and we're not sure why. The trap is we go into, I should know better, I should have done it better, this is so wrong, and we start shoulding and blaming and judging ourselves and everything else. Like, no. First of all, stop doing that. First of all, first lesson. Second
Not
lesson,
helpful. Not helpful.
no. But the second one is to reflect back on your upbringing and look for the seeds, the themes, those little nuances of life that changed. You notice looking back, you go, oh, I see where that happened. How my communication with my mother or my father or whatever it was, that's where it started. And recognize that that kid that you were back then didn't have the wherewithal you do now, the acumen, the skills, or even the reason to believe that you could do things better. You did what you knew how to at the time, thinking that's the way to do it. Nothing wrong with that. Things now you know differently, you can change that wiring. That's the rewriting history, so to speak. But so key, because all these things we talked about, I mean, we talked about many, many topics in the last few months, in case you haven't noticed. And by the way, if you haven't noticed, go watch them. We've got plenty of talks out
Please
there.
do.
Yeah. But then we're saying is that all these talks, I say probably half of them, if not more, relate back into how we were raised and what we took on as our beliefs in dating and relationships from when we were kids, the way we received and expected love to happen. And so this topic, which is a juicy one as well, comes back to, in a way, the same thread, which is we act out in adult life the way we think love should be expressed based upon the way we were raised oftentimes. So we don't necessarily know we're doing too much or too little. And again, no blame, no judgment, no self-recrimination. It's awareness, just to notice, like, that's interesting, I do that again. Why am I doing that again? Where did I get that from? Ask additive questions, not why do I keep doing that wrong? It's like, no, additive questions, positive questions. Where did I start doing that in the first place? And then you can start getting some answers and some leverage to change it. Of course, working with one of us too, or somebody else like us, is much more effective because we have the skills to help you facilitate that and change that. And then your adult dating experience will be much more in the middle of the two, rather than being one end of the other spectrum.
It's the best news that we all can change.
Yes, absolutely.
Nothing is permanent, no matter, I mean, I have talked to people that have had hard things happen and scary things happen, and they still were able to end up having a loving, caring relationship because they were willing to do the work. And, I love when we talk about don't give yourself a hard time, because I've not met anybody that's ever made them change and be a better person. It's more when we are more kind and gentle about, wow, you really did do the best you could. And now we could do better. And what could we learn to do better? And we're much more apt to change. I mean, I said, how do you train a dog? You reward it for doing good things. You don't get mad at it because it doesn't know better. It knew this before, and now you're going to teach it differently. And you do lots of praising. Well, please be just as gentle and nice to yourself. But I had a hard life growing up, and I'm going to make new changes now. And I've had some hard relationships, but I really am ready to have a good one now. And I'm willing to do the work. I'm willing to look at why and what I can now proactively do. Because the first time you do something, you go, oh, it worked. I go, oh, no. Isn't that so wonderful when we have that experience with our clients?
Oh, God,
and they come back and what we suggested, and they come back and they go, it felt better, and wow, it worked, and I feel more capable, and I feel like I'm undoing and redoing. I'm getting a do-over, which is so amazing. So amazing.
It's funny because you started mentioning the dog methodology about, how do you get dogs to learn tricks? You give them treats. You bribe them. You don't punish them. It's interesting how as humans we don't do that. We tend to punish ourselves. So when we do have that success and that, like, oh, it worked, imagine that's being the treat you get for doing the right thing. Because in a way, it is. It's the reward for doing the right thing the right way, because you learned something. And we look at dogs sometimes and think they're a lot simpler. It's like, no, we learn the same way. We learn from punishment, or we learn from treats. I'd much rather we learn from treats. It's so much more fun.
It's so much more fun. I know one of the things my clients wait for is if I'm going to give them a standing ovation. Okay, watch, it's coming. I'm going to give you a standing ovation because look what you just did. Because I think sometimes we'll even kind of gloss over it if we've done something kind of hard and we really did kind of a good job. We're just like, I think I did something. And we're like, no, we are stopping. We're going to appreciate this. We're going to do a standing ovation for this. And it cracks them up. But I can tell they're now taking it in,
Yeah.
that they're really internalizing it. And we know that's how it sticks, is when you owned it and said, I did this. I did this. Because you and I can give the best advice possible, but what we need is a client we're going to walk alongside and they're going to do the work. And then they come back going, and I go, you get all the credit. I can give you great advice, but if you don't go practice it, I'm not there. So you had the success, you get all the credit, hon. You did a fabulous job. So you get a standing ovation.
I definitely prize them. I've not done standing ovations. That's giving me some ideas. That is cool.
Isn't that a fun thing to do? Especially and even on a phone call, I tell them I'm standing up, but on a Zoom call, I pop up. And I sincerely mean it. I couldn't be more sincere about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it really sets in what they go, oh, wow, it is important. I go, this is important with a capital I.
Yeah, definitely. That's the thing for me, that to have clients to really embody and embrace these things, so they really live those places and come from that place going on. It's like I can just go, yes, I give them my kiss of success. It's like, give them the love. They've done the work. They can live their life fully and wholly now. I'm so happy for them.
The kiss of success. I love that. I'm sure they wait for that for sure.
Absolutely.
So if you've had experience at all dating when it was too much or not enough, I'm sure at least one time in your dating life it's happened, probably more than one, certainly happened more than one for us. You have an opportunity to discuss it with us, and we'd be so happy to puzzle it out with you and get you to the other side where you're getting just enough, like the 3 bears.
Yes.
So the way you reach me is initially through my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. And it's the way that you think about the perfect catch is that you get to learn how to be one, and then you'll attract one. You can sign up for my newsletter, and you can also sign up for a complimentary conversation with me. Just click on what's holding you back from love. And then you can also send me a personal email to Christine@theperfectcatch.com. And you can find my social media and my personal videos and my videos with Barry on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest. And then on YouTube and Instagram, I'm Coach Christine Baumgartner.
Nice. You're getting better at this all the time.
Thank you. I've really been practicing now that I have a couple of different names to go by. My And how would they reach you, Barry?
Well, thank you, Christine, for asking. Like Christine, I have a website and also have social media. So my website, which is my name, which is barryselby.com. And on the front page of my site, and my site is about to get redesigned finally. I did redesign about last year, but it didn't get done very well. So I've been limping along with it. But at least on my website, the front page works. So on my front page of my site, you can either sign up for a mini session with me. So you can book a session with me there at the top, which is take your next step. Or if you want to just join my email list, which I did recommend as well, because these replays go out to all my email audience. At the bottom of the homepage, there is a little link saying join my email list. So you can just be part of that as well. On my website, which you can't see at the moment, but it will be there, is my book, my coaching, my online courses, and some of my video programs as well. You can also find me on my social media platforms. So I am listed as Barry Selby, certainly on YouTube, where I have 1,500 videos or so, including all of these shows that are saved in one of my playlists. So you can definitely check out my YouTube channel. Please become a subscriber. That'd be nice. And so, yes, Barry Selby on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Twitter, Clubhouse, Pinterest, and then on Instagram, which is the only one that's different because of some annoying person hacked my account way back when. So now I'm the real Barry Selby, just to make sure. So find me, follow me, and like Christine, reach out for support if you need it. We're here to help you.
And we're here every week on Thursdays at 1 o'clock Western time and 4 o'clock Eastern time and all the times in between. So watch us live, share us live with your friends and family. And if you are watching the replay, please share it with your friends who are having problems with too much or not enough in their dating life. And Absolutely. We love getting suggestions for
topics,
subjects for the future, as well as questions or comments about what we talked about today. We're happy to answer them. We love those. And so subscribe.
Nicely done.
That's our new thing to talk about. Please subscribe.
Yes. And we will see you next week.
We'll see you next week. Bye for now.
See you then.